Okay, my little Mickey Mouse watch says it's awful close to 6 o'clock, so, convening the meeting. This is a, meeting of the Baldwin Zoning Board of Appeals. And this is a request by, Mr. Alex Gore, administrative appeal. Opening the meeting, just to say that while we're not following specifically Robert's Rules of Order, I think we all need to be polite and keep our emotions to a limit. Stand up and identify yourself if you're not a resident, and we'll hear you. Everyone who's here who wishes to speak before we adjourn will have an opportunity to do so. Not that I need to make the statement, but I'm going to, just for clarification, is that John Bishop is not here this evening. John Bishop is a member of the appeals board, has been for many years, and if he were here, then he would be asked to sit in the audience and not up front. We are required to have a quorum in order to have board members and listen to and do a vote, and we have 5 here tonight, so we have more than adequate numbers. So, Mr. Gorloff's lots are map 1, lot 26G, and he also has map 1, lot 26F on Bishop Delicio Lane. What I want to do is just give a brief overview or statement. If any of you contradict some of the information here, please don't interrupt. When I finish, when you speak, you can clarify. If I said 5 o'clock and it was actually 6 o'clock and that's important, then yes, certainly go ahead and clarify that. But many of you were at the site walk on Saturday, so you had a visual pretty much of what he was asking for. The file information that we have shows that Mr. Gorloff purchased property on Harris and Bishop Delicio back in 2021 and 22. There is information in the file at that time that he had conversation with Wesley Sunderland, then our code enforcement officer, regarding a permit to place a double-wide modular home on the location of Harris Road and Bishop Delicio. There also is information in the file there that shows a subdivision, 4-lot, small subdivision request or paperwork. And that was, as I say, 2021-22. Nothing happened with either one of those, either the modular double wide coming in or the 4-lot subdivision being formulated. Fast forward to 2024, Mr. Gorloff contacted Don Kent to see if they could reissue the expired building permit with corrections. The corrections to be, first off, to change it from a double-wide mobile home, a modular home, to a stick-built home, and 2, to change the location from Harris Road, which is a town road, to Bishop Delicio Lane, which is a private road. Don indicated to him that he could not do that because when he sold the property on Harris Road, which is a town road, now Bishop Delicio, which has restrictions size-wise. So Mr. Gorloff came to the town and requested a special appeal or whatever, and I got the email and I contacted him, said I had received it. And I said I also had read one of the emails that Mr. Kent, between him, had suggested that because he had sold his property on Harris Road, which is a town road, he might work with his abutting property owners in terms of widening Bishop Delisio to accommodate so that he could actually do what he wanted to do up in that location. So I asked him if he wanted to work with Mr. Kent and with the abutting property owner to make that happen. He said no, he wanted to go forward with the appeals hearing, and so we are here tonight. So, would you like to speak first? I mean, Rory, this is your appeals hearing.
Yeah, I'm happy to speak. My name's Alec. Thank you for having me. So, yeah, I mean, I'm simply here because I have, you know, a 13-acre lot with 1,500 feet of road frontage on an existing road with several dwellings beyond that that I'd like to put a single-family residence on, and ultimately, I'm not being allowed to do that because of what, you know, I want to call an oversight or a miscommunication on the town's part back in 2022 when I did split off and sell a lot. So, you know, the issue, as I understand, is not necessarily the widening of Bishop Delisio, because there is, you know, based on a survey, a 50-foot right-of-way. So in terms of the width of the road, there's more than enough room within the existing right-of-way to do that if I needed to. And I'm not opposed to widening the road or bringing it up to grade. The restriction, from what I understand, is the fact that the right-of-way is not 60 feet, it's 50 feet, and the town requires the 60-foot right-of-way for any frontage beyond that or any frontage on that private road to be considered actual frontage. So in my, you know, in my communication with the town, I did submit a survey. I had conversations about potentially, you know, going through a minor subdivision. I had conversations about, if not utilizing the existing permit, then transferring it to the purchaser, you know, all of which there was no objection with. So, you know, in my mind, as I was going through that process, at no point did I feel that, you know, me getting a 50-foot right-of-way is going to prohibit me, or let alone anyone else on that road, you know, potentially having future developments or upgrades or whatever you know you want to call it. So, you know, I think ultimately therein lies the concern on my end is, you know, I'd like to, you know, have, you know, this 10-foot issue of a width of a right-of-way not restrict me from being able to put a dwelling there on the vacant lot.
Well, would anybody like to speak to that before I respond to him? Well, yes, go ahead.
I can add a few words. I've dealt a little bit with right-of-ways. In public roads, most right-of-ways are determined by, is it a 3-rod road or a 4-rod road? Well, a rod is 16.5 feet. So 3-rod road is 49.5 feet, and that's why most towns have a below 50 feet as a right-of-way. It's convenient, where a 4-rod is ends up to be 66 feet. I dealt with Route 113, that's a 4-rod highway, so it's 33 feet each side. in private land, when you have a right-of-way, that's to allow, a roadway access, a driveway, whatever, to go through that right way. If it's 50 feet wide, the road does not necessarily have to be right in the center of the right-of-way, but it's made that wide so that obstacles can be avoided. That right-of-way, is still the property of the owner of that land that the right-of-way goes through. But the restriction is that they can't, build or put things on that right-of-way that would obstruct the travel of the traffic. Although, I haven't dealt with it, so it's not clear, if, let's say a driveway is in a 50-foot right-of-way in the center of it, and the driveway is 18 feet wide, the landowner can do activity in that right-of-way as long as he stays at least 10 feet away from the route of travel. So that's basically how right-of-ways work.
Well, I guess my question is, if we were having the meeting here tonight as an appeals and looking for a variance, and when you said there's 60-foot right-of-way, formerly 50-foot right-of-way, as an appeal, and I don't know, recently we did that for my grandson, and CMP just needs an easement to get through with their telephone poles, but, you know, I'm not sure the process of whether would go to the planning board, or whether it would wind up back on the appeals board. I would think with the 50-foot right-of-way should be more than adequate. The Achilles heel, I think, that we're dealing with right now, is that when we were down there Saturday, if you look at the travel lane, if you will, it's about 8 feet. And we'll even extend it, say it's 9 feet, that you see the tire tracks. Recently, there was a fire situation down there. A fire truck, on average, is 7.5 to 8 feet wide. And so, when we measured that from the 8 or even given 9 feet, you come up to either 12 feet, was it 13, 12 to 13?
Yeah, it was like maybe 15 was the widest.
So now you've got 16 feet of 2 fire trucks trying to pass each other to go fill a dump tank so that the house doesn't burn down and doing whatever. So when I heard Dawn's suggestion in terms of you and the abutting property owner widening the portion that pertains to you so that you're not held up doing what you want to do, it's not my part to address any other situations on Bishop Delicio, which at some point somebody's got to, but from your standpoint, you're being prevented because your part, you know, God forbid something happens, you don't want to have to carry on your shoulder if there was a loss of life because the travel lane was not adequate to take care of emergency vehicles. That's my take. But anybody else, you know, jump right in because we need to have a cross section. Yes.
Mr. Gorloff's deed says there's a 15-foot right-of-way, not 50. So there's some question in terms of how you could widen that.
Okay. We would need to see, I guess, deeds and paperwork, something that has some language regarding that width. But, you know, on average, I know putting in on our private road for my grandson is 18 to 20 feet wide, and it's adequate to accomplish. Take a couple fire trucks or a big, you've been up there, Donna.
Mm-hmm.
We did what we wanted to do because we wanted the end result is have a house there. And we could have just, you know, kept skirting things and doing whatever, but we never would have gotten to where we needed to be. So,
I understand all that. What was communicated to me was not the condition of the road, it was the fact that, my survey shows a 50-foot right-of-way, and it's supposed to be a 60-foot right-of-way. The 15-foot right-of-way shown on the deed belongs to the original dwelling on 13 Harris Road, which is unrelated to any surveys that I've completed, any sales that I've made. The survey, and I have a copy of that, will show clearly that there's a 50-foot right-of-way left for existing travel on Bishop DeLisio Lane, and what was communicated to me was neither I or the purchaser of that land can build, because that should be a 60-foot right-of-way, not a 50-foot right-of-way. And because it's not a 60-foot right-of-way, it's not legitimate frontage, and therefore you don't have the required 200 feet of frontage. So the other piece that's interesting is the way the road is designed. The actual road runs on the very edge of the 50-foot right-of-way, so we're talking about a 10-foot variance that's 30-plus feet away from the actual traveled path. So as you can see, whether it was a 60-foot or a 50-foot right-of-way, we're not talking about any difference whatsoever, into the impact of the traveled way across Bishop DeLisio Lane. In my communication, I was never, opposed to, perhaps upgrading the condition of the road until, my driveway that I'm, looking to create, which would be 200 feet or so probably down the road. I'm happy to do that. I think if any town would, have that sort of requirement, but, the fact of the matter is I'm being told I don't have, legitimate frontage, because the entrance of Bishop DeLisio Lane is 50 feet based on surveys that I have and the land split that I've created, which, again, wasn't an issue that was raised to me, when I had initially presented the survey and even, the minor subdivision approval. I submitted all the same surveys. All of them showed the 50-foot right of way, and there was never any objection to what I presented, and it seems that now it is an issue. And one of my questions throughout the whole process was, a few years back, that there was a duplex built on Bishop DeLisio that had no road frontage. It was a back lot based on the town record. So there's kind of scenarios that I feel are permissible, and I feel like me being told, or the person who purchased the land being told they can't build because of a 10-foot section of width on paper that's missing is ultimately
part of it, the way the zoning reads, is the 200 foot, and the Harris Road, which is the town road, that went away when you sold that property. I think that.
But it was only 100 feet on Harris Road, so the other
Right,
half.
but I think if you go back, looking at some of the emails, whatever, between you and Wes, when he was trying to consider that whole thing, when you wanted to put the double wide down on that corner, he was taking in consideration part of Harris and part of Bishop DeLisio to come up to the 200, is that correct? And so he was trying to give you a little wiggle room there, because you had some on the town road. Well, now you're coming back and your request is all on a private road, which is challenged to begin with. So, Aaron, here we are. But, part of the problem, in my mind, is an expired permit that you'd like to have major modifications to. It's not a matter of the fact that the permit outdated or this or that or whatever. It's, I want you to now, it's gonna be a stick built versus a modular home, and oh, by the way, it's gonna be 75 or 80 or 100 yards up from the, whoa, wait a minute. So, I mean, it's almost as if, I mean, that's not something, if the board members can, anybody speak up when they want, but that's not something, we can't override Don and say, oh yeah, well, by the way, that's why he's in the position of code enforcement officer. If you go back and revisit it from the start, get with Dawn or whoever and say, what do I need to do? And whether you go back before the planning board, I mean, I don't wanna say that, you know, we're back to square one, but essentially the time that has passed from 2021-22, now we're 2024. If you had done what you were gonna do back then, you came before Dawn, you had the permit, you had scheduled, was there a meeting, Joe, scheduled for the 4-lot,
I can't remember exactly what meetings were scheduled for. I know Don told me Mr. Garloff wanted to come in and talk to the planning board, and then Mr. Garloff would not show up, and that happened, I think, 3 times.
Yeah, so, but I would say, like I said, I think to try and go forward with what you want, if in fact the procedure is, I would go back to Dawn, and I would say, okay, what do I need to do? And if it means scheduling another meeting with the planning board to go forward, and ultimately it means widening Bishop Delicio for your portion and the other party, that they're gonna have to do something as well. But what that does for you is looking at the paperwork that you have, while you don't plan on doing anything at the present time, I would suspect down the road that, those other lots that you had, you probably plan on doing something with that. Well, now you're gonna have access off in Bishop Delicio, because,
Gary? Maybe I'm confused here, which I get confused easy. He had a building permit for a lot on Harris Road.
they're on the corner there.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, was that a specific lot? Or was that,
Yeah, is it 2-acre lot? That's
It was on the entire parcel,
Oh,
of which I split off.
okay,
So the permit was issued on, you
A
know,
specific-
the remnants, you know, or the entire parcel of which I retained the majority of.
okay, I guess that answers my question. Either way, you're asking us to asking Dawn to renew a permit that really doesn't pertain to the piece of property it was originally.
But that wasn't even really the initial request. The request was, I'd like to build on this lot. You know, if I can renew a permit, great. I paid $1,000 for it,
Yeah, but you're trying to renew it on a different piece of property.
but I'm not even really trying to renew. I'm just trying to build. Like, if I can get approval to build and renew a permit that I paid $1,000 for, like, great, I'll take it. But I'm not being told your permit's too old, your requests are, out of the scope of what's acceptable. I'm being told you split a piece of land off, and because of that, you created a right-of-way that's only 50 feet, that should have been 60 feet, and now, because you don't have that 60-foot right-of-way, neither I, nor the abutter, nor anyone else in Bishop Delicio can ever build.
okay, the other part of that is, if you had not sold that corner with Harris Road and Bishop Delicio, you would have had an opportunity with that Harris Road portion to put a right-of-way up to your property, and whatever's going on with Bishop Delicio, width or whatever, wouldn't be an issue for you, because you're gaining access to your property through Harris Road. And I think that's the point Dawn was making, is the town does not have to be notified when you sell property. There's a lot of land that changes hands unless the party comes into the town or the clerk. We don't know about it. So Dawn couldn't confide in you and say, ooh, wait a minute, do you really want to do this? Because you two weren't communicating until after you had already sold the property, so.
Well, correction, I was communicating, and I did present the survey. I have the email exchange of a copy of the survey showing the 50-foot right-of-way and, approval of further split in design. So I have that all in email exchange. I have all that in records, and herein lies the issue is, I understand I can split a lot without notifying the town, but in this scenario, I did. I have access to Bishop Deliso. I presented a survey that showed a 50-foot right-of-way. I had absolutely no reason to question that. I could have emailed the surveyor, said, hey, at 10 feet. And there we go, we would have been done. You know, if that's what would have been communicated to me. Would have been an easy fix, 5 minutes, there you go, we wouldn't be sitting here. But I was never told to do that. And now, you know, now I'm being told, well, you need to get with the abutter that you sold the land, you need to correct the issue. But ultimately, you know, I feel like I followed the steps that I should have, you know, and I don't know if it was an oversight, I don't know what it was, but ultimately, I followed the steps that I should have, and as a result, I'm now being told, well, you need to fix, you know, this issue.
Oh, yeah, like I said, either you do that to move on with what you're trying to accomplish, or you don't. But this, you were making mention of $1,000 or whatever. If I come down here and I pay my registration, and I have my stickers on my car, and I choose to put the car in the garage, and I don't use it for a year or two, then yeah, that money is no good to me, because I bought it so I have the permits or the license or whatever, the stickers, so I could drive the car down the road. So, I mean, it's sort of like a push and shove type thing here, that you went to a certain, and then you stopped. It's not up to Mr. Pierce to say, oh, and by the way, Mr. Gola, you remember us, so you're gonna do something here? It's not up to Dawn to come back and say, oh, by the way, Mr. Gola, do you know if you do this, this, and this, then you won't, it's not up to them to do that. I see it all the time with people who are diligent, and come in and say, what if I do this? They're not gonna say you're a bother. They want it to work for you, and if you don't, then here we are.
And that's what I did. I said, what if I do this? Hey, here's the survey. This is my idea. And the email response was, that looks great.
Can I interject for a second?
Yeah, no, absolutely.
I'm just looking for some clarity on my end. I've heard several different sort of questions here, but the question that we were trying to answer on Saturday, what we're trying to answer now, I think, is we have on the ground an 8 to 15 foot wide road. We have the concern about access to that lot with emergency vehicles. Mr. Borlaugh saying that he has a 50-foot right-of-way, or at least a surveyed one. We're also hearing that there's a deeded 15-foot right-of-way, right? And the town is requiring a 60-foot right-of-way. So it feels like we have a lot of moving parts here that need to be clarified. You know, and I'm not sure if this line of discussion is clarifying that for me at this point in time.
Yeah, I think I'm in the same spot. I'm trying to understand if so I missed the walk around, so apologize for that. But if there's a 50-foot right of way, is the concern that it's not all usable? Is that the issue?
No, the concern is that it's not 60. That's the concern. That was the only reason I was told that I will be denied, and anyone else will be denied the ability to build on the road, is because it's not 60, it's 50.
So I'm still confused. Is that true?
I can show you the surveys if you'd like.
Yeah.
I would say the other issue is, if you're going to have more than 2 houses on a private road, even if it is 60 feet, you have to go before the planning board for minor subdivision, which is what happened for your friend. And he's got that issue as well.
How
And I
so?
think I would appreciate it if you made it clear when you say a chain of emails and being told who told you what, because that wasn't me.
I understand. I'm seeking for permission to build one single family dwelling.
But there are already more than the 3 on
There's more dwellings.
your road.
You're saying that because there's more dwellings beyond his property, it's still dwellings on the private road,
Exactly.
and that qualifies, that's 2. So that will qualify, if he builds 1, that qualifies for a minor subdivision.
It should have been at least a minor subdivision initially.
Right.
For whatever reason was not.
Okay.
But that does not justify continuing to build more and more houses
Right.
on a road where.
Why was
there
it
shouldn't have
supposed to
been.
be a minor subdivision?
Pardon me?
Why was it supposed to be a minor subdivision?
Because the ordinance say if you've got more than 2 residences on a private road, which would be 3 plus, you've got to go to the planning board. And when it's a minor subdivision for 3, that was probably count as a major one, because it's, I think there's 6 or 7 houses on there, give or take.
So any single private road, anybody that wants to build on any private road that has an existing dwelling has to go through minor subdivision?
If they want to build more than total of
After the
2
second,
houses.
the
Yeah.
third puts you into a subdivision.
And the subdivision requirements say 60
So-
foot as well.
Are you referring to, all of this happening within a 5-year period? Because that's the state
No.
statute.
No, you can make a split every 5 years,
Yeah,
but that's on a public road. If you're on a private road, you cannot build on that split unless you go through a minor subdivision or a major subdivision.
so
Depending on
why
what
was
the
I
case might
issued
be.
a permit then?
Pardon me?
How was I issued a permit? How was the backlot duplex built a few years back without a subdivision process?
I was not here at the time, I can't tell you that. I just quoted you before based on what's in the ordinance.
And where can I find that ordinance?
If you get out a copy of the ordinance,
Okay, so anybody that wants to build on a private road, if it's the third house, if there's already 2 houses,
Right.
right,
and they wanna put a third house on a private road, they have to go through minor subdivision.
that's right.
Okay, that's new to me.
And the frontage for your permit was taken into consideration on Harrods Road, which is a town road, but you could have run a new private road off of Harrods Road and built 2 houses off of that without a minor subdivision by splitting the lot. But nobody came and asked, at least nobody asked me about that. Or I would have given that suggestion.
So there's no permits being issued in the town of Baldwin on private roads that have more than 2 dwellings without those people going through a private subdivision?
That's what we had to do with,
That's right. And it was 20 years, because I gave 10 acres to all 3 of my children, 2 of them built on it, the other one didn't, the oldest one didn't, she was in Connecticut. And then fast forward to my grandson wanting to build, so that lot is sitting there dormant. We wanted to break the stone wall and put a road in down so he could build in lower, and when I came to Don said, no, now at number 3. I said, well, so 20 years later, but it's still, that third one puts you into a subdivision.
Okay, well, I mean, that's fine, if that's the ordinance, that's fine, it's kind of irrelevant to, you know, this situation that we're talking about, because even if I apply for minor subdivision, I'm gonna be told, you need 60-foot right-of-way, but you have a 50-foot right-of-way.
if you go by the ordinance, that's correct. But you have the opportunity to make it 60 feet wide by working with those ladies who currently own the.
And what if
lot
they
and build on.
refuse to do so?
They are
What if-
willing to do so, which is why their lawyer contacted you to try to work out an agreement so that you could do that.
Okay, so,
And I emailed you about that as soon as I heard about it, so that you would know.
yes, well, I understand that they wanna do something, but I'm here because I'm being told I can't do anything unless I, you know, now I have to go back to them, we have to hire a survey, we have to get a new survey, we have to get that submitted, and, sounds like we'll have to do minor subdivision, me or this person, cause they have frontage on Bishop DeLiso,
Mhm.
right?
That's probably true, but at least it's possible that way. The other way, it's not, by the ordinances anyway.
Okay, so the fact that I, you know, I was in touch with the town, I submitted, you know, the survey, and, you know, that was, for lack of a better term, approved is, irrelevant.
Where, do you have a survey that's been approved by the town with the signatures on it?
Well, I have an email exchange with the copy of the survey, and then me being told that my further proposed minor subdivision is, it looks good.
Well, it could look good, but unless the town has approved it, if they approved it, there'd be a section where either the planning board or the select board or the appeals board signed it, saying it was approved. I
At
haven't
this
seen
point,
it.
we're getting a little bit off, because with the board up here, the purpose of us is that he wants to reinstate the permit and modifications of it from a double-wide modular to a stick-built home,
Right.
1,000 yards or whatever it is, beyond the footprint that the permit was issued for,
Right, excuse me, I didn't.
Sorry.
right?
Can I just say something?
You can say
So
anything.
here's, land use ordinances, I'm sure they have a copy in the, office. So, under conditional uses, they have a clause about duration of conditional use permit. Provided all conditions and standards of approval are maintained, a conditional use permit shall be a permanent grant of permission and shall run with the land, end quote. Meaning that piece of property that you originally proposed the use, no,
He's never had a conditional use permit,
he hasn't. So the permit was
a building permit.
a building permit.
Yeah.
And the building permit was for a specific
It was for
period
that.
of time, which it goes on, this is for a conditional use permit, I don't know if the same applies to building use, but it says, however, if the use lapses for a period of 2 years, then the conditional use permit shall cease to be enforced. Is that the same, for a building permit, are those the same terms, or no? How long does
Is
a
it a year?
building permit?
A building permit is supposed to start construction within 6 months and be substantially
Okay.
complete within 2 years.
Okay. So, that hasn't happened, so what's
No.
the status of that building permit that he originally got?
Well, it would be void because it was predicated on frontage on Harris
Right.
and Delicia Road.
So it's a whole
Changed.
different piece of property,
And the design of the building was changed, so
Right.
you can't renew it unless you're at the same parcel with the same plans. And you could possibly come in and ask to renew it, but it would be expired. And
So-
it would be unusual.
Right.
You'd have to have a good reason.
so that, does that make sense, that the building permit is for a very specific proposal?
I totally understand that. I'm more so looking for permission to build on a vacant 13-acre lot.
But then you need
That's
a
what-
new building permit.
And that's fine, The whole reason I'm here is because I was told whether I get a new permit or not, I cannot build because I do not have, legitimate road frontage.
So it sounds like there's a solution that could be exercised here.
Yes, at my cost is what it comes down to, even though I was previously led to believe that what I did was adequate.
It would almost sound to me that a response in an email that says this looks good is, oh, good, go ahead with it and submit it for signature to the town, you know, probably was, what the intent was. I'm guessing from whoever responded to your email. Email is not my understanding, approval process, here in the town. It just, you know, if I want Don to sign something for me, I might send it to him ahead of time in an email. He might look at it, say, yeah, this looks good. That's not an approval, that's a, oh, good. And then now I'll go into the office and actually bring it in and get it signed. I guess is probably what I guess is possibly going on here. So, you know, you probably took it as, oh, okay, I'm all set, you know, as compared to email is not a signed sign off for anything, I guess. So I'm hoping, you know, it sounds like from the appeals board perspective, we're not, this is beyond the scope of us being able to respond, right?
Yeah, and,
To the request.
I mean, if we're looking at,
So,
when
we
we're,
really wanna help him as much as possible, to figure
Right.
out his best next steps.
I mean, when we're looking, what, we have 30 days or 35 days, the board will convene after the meeting is over. So the 35 days to make a decision, respond to you in writing, copy you, and when it goes to the select board and the planning board, so on and so forth. But if we're going through a deal here where they always have steps regarding a hardship. So if you're looking at a hardship, then the steps that ask the questions, and one of them is that the hardship is not a result of action taken by the applicant or prior owner, when in fact it is, because your opportunity to do something on Harris Road, you lost when you sold that property, so that was directly you, not the town that did that. And when it talks about, that the land cannot yield a reasonable return unless a variance is granted, well, in your case, I think what we're suggesting is that we start first, if you get with Dawn, you start back with the code enforcement officer, and when it goes back before the planning board, ultimately to get what you want, but that's, we can't do that.
Well, and that's fine, I mean, I'm only here because I was directed to do this, and I feel like I was misled, because it sounds like you guys don't necessarily have the power to, you know, I feel like we're talking about different issues here, like, I'm happy to upgrade the road, like, safety is my priority, like, that's not an issue.
Yeah.
Renewing a permit, like, if I have an opportunity to, you know, to save $1,000, like, sure, why not?
Yeah.
So I asked the question, like, it doesn't hurt to ask the question. The reason I'm here ultimately is because of a 50-foot right-of-way that should have been 60-foot right-of-way, and the only way that can be addressed is me going back to the abutter, correcting the issue, or planning board. So I'm not sure why I was directed to go to the appeals board. I don't feel like, you know, you guys can help me. I appreciate everyone's time, though, but, you know, at least I have a sense that what the...
You were the one that requested it.
Because I was told that this is what I need to do.
Okay. I was gonna say, that's when I came back to you, if you remember, I said, wait a minute, don't you wanna try and work with the code enforcement officer, maybe ultimately the planning board? And you said, no, I wanna go forward.
Because the code enforcement officer told me I have to go to appeals.
But in this, on this board, I think, and you guys can correct me if I'm wrong, but our role is to really decide on very specific issues. Someone is appealing a decision and presenting the reasons for that. It's not, as much as we're sympathetic to the position you're in, it's not our role to kind of help you figure out this problem. You filed an administrative appeal saying that you felt that the CEO had made an error in denying you the right to continue with your permit. So that's the issue that's really the only thing we can decide right here.
I understand, and that's
So-
exactly why I just said what I said, you know, I feel like...
No, and
you
I
know,
think
that-
you're right. So it seems like what needs to happen is you do, as Gary's been saying, you know, you need to talk more with Don and with the planning board to kind of resolve, because these are complicated issues, and
Yeah, and that's what I tried to do. I mean,
Right.
again, I was told I need to file an appeal, I need to, you know, and
Yeah.
so we'll,
I think maybe those meetings that you missed with the planning board would have been beneficiary.
So I did sit through the initial meeting, we had a very productive conversation. I never committed to the next meeting. I'm not sure why I was waited, and then when I did commit, I was told, hey, come on in. I did come in, and it turns out when I showed up, there was other urgent matters, so my matter was never addressed. So, you know, that's precisely what happened. You know, I was always happy to throughout the process of the planning board approval, I learned, you know, that the minor subdivision is, you know, gonna be a tremendous amount of work. You know, I'm talking upgrading, you know, almost 2,000 feet of private road, you know, for that to happen. So, like, that's cost prohibitive, you know, for anyone that's looking to build, you know.
I'm getting confused the more you talk, because we just talked about a minor subdivision that you knew nothing about, and now you're telling that they did tell you that?
I did not say I knew nothing about the
Yes, you
minor
did, you just
subdivision.
said, Mr. Kent said, if there's more than 2 houses on a piece of property.
That's
on a
not
private-
why I
on
submitted
a
for my
private
subdivision.
road, excuse me. He said a private road has 2 houses on it, and the third house has to go through a minor subdivision. And you said, oh, is that right? Gary just said that he had to go through it with his house. And now you're saying that they told you that you had to go through a minor subdivision.
Can I clarify?
For the four
They
lots?
didn't, that was my initiative. I was looking at splitting the land into 4 lots, so I took the initiative because I know that if, you know, in the state of Maine, if you wanna split more than 3 dwelling units in a 5-year period, you have to go through the subdivision approval. Why I didn't understand that it's a requirement, you know, for any third house on a private road to go through minor subdivision is just because of the very fact that, you know, as I owned the land, it was not a requirement. There was a duplex put on Bishop DeLisa Lane with no road frontage, no subdivision approval. It was the 7th and 8th dwelling on the road. So I think, you know, it shouldn't be a surprise that I find it surprising that it is a requirement when, in my experience, on this small road that I'm an owner on, it hasn't been a requirement. When I submitted for a permit, you know, that had frontage on Bishop and DeLiso, my plot plan showed access from Bishop DeLiso, you know, and I was never told, oh, you need to go through minor subdivision for this single house, which has frontage on Harris Road, which just so happens to be the 8th residence on the, I was never told that. So it is surprising to me that minor subdivision is a requirement for the 3rd dwelling. And it's absolutely unrelated to the fact that I did attempt minor subdivision in order to get 4 lots.
Yeah. But once again, we're getting away from what we as a board do, and like I said, ultimately going back, because, you know, I think that you're a conscientious person. I think when we make reference to the fact that, God forbid, there's a fire down there, with the pre-existing dwellings that are already down there, if you wind up inundating that area with another 5 or 6 or 8 or 10, then you've just added insult to injury. And, you know, the fact, in consulting with the town's attorney, you know, the little kid type thing, if you let them do it, why can't I do it? The fact that this fire has happened and whatever, yeah, all of a sudden you put the brakes on and say, not sure how all of this happened or was allowed to happen, but we can't let any more happen. And so that's why I was addressing you, and I think Dawn was addressing you. How that's all going to be handled, I don't know, down the road, but you're concerned about what you want to do, and Dawn's saying if you do this, this, and this, then you're not part of what's going on back here. You're part of what you're trying to develop on your property. So get with your abutting property owner, get with Dawn, get with the planning board, and hopefully go forward with what you're trying to accomplish.
I'm happy to do that.
Wonderful. Yeah.
But isn't there something in our ordinance that there's a maximum number of houses on private road?
Well, that's just what we talked about. Well, part of the deal comes up with,
Is that
what they're talking about, every 5 years or whatever.
7, 8?
I think, what is it, 8, I think.
8, so if there's 8 on there,
They're pretty much there.
that's the end of it anyway,
And
I would think, am I wrong?
I don't think you're wrong.
There's 7 on there.
Someone could make a case that if the road was brought up to standards, perhaps they might be able to get an appeal to allow an additional 1 or 2 houses, but it's not in the ordinance for sure.
But it is in the ordinance that 8 is max on a
Right.
private road.
Exactly. And it's just about there.
How many there is?
I believe there's 7.
Well, looking at,
Just so, throwing out there, do we want to adjourn on the building permit part of the meeting?
you talked about, Joe, when you and I were talking, that I didn't know about the, duplex down there. So, someplace I had listed who the parties were, and I came up with either 6 or 7,
And
with counting the duplexes too, with 5, and then the duplex would be 6, 7.
yeah, because it's not houses, it's dwelling units.
But this would be the process, if you apply for a new building permit with the planning board, this would all be discussed, and you could bring up, you know, your concerns and work it through with them about,
I totally understand.
yeah, so that was, as opposed to here, I guess I'm saying.
Would anybody else like to speak regarding this permit and this issue? Okay, not hearing any, I'm going to adjourn this meeting, and I thank you all for attending.
Thank you.
You're welcome.